Okay, welcome back to part 2 of the video. We left off on this slide, so I'll move on to the next one. And in this case, I ask you to do number 29. I've rewritten it out here, just in case that's a little too small to see. And notice that we've got y's inside both parens. It might make more sense to kind of expand it out at this point, just so that you can see everything you have. The left side, which I've done in red, is negative y times y times y. Do remember, please, that cubed there, that exponent 3 only goes to the y. It's not next to the negative. So I've got 3 sets of y, but each of those are positive. But I do have that negative that I was originally given. Inside the second set of parens here, well, I distribute that 2 because it's on the outside. It goes to everything inside. 2 and y both get raised to the second power. And I could break that right side apart. And so I would have what I had before, which was the negative y times y times y. Well, there's that negative. There's that y times y times y. And what I've done here in moving from this row to this row is I've put things that are like each other next to each other. So the negative and the 2 squared go together, and all the y's go together. I had 1, 2, 3, and another one. That last one was raised to the second power. So actually what I have is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This counts as 2. So really what I have is negative 2 to the second power, y to the 5th power. And I go ahead and call negative 2 to the second power. Remember, the second power only goes to what it's next to, which is the 2. So I've got negative 4 y to the 5th. And that's the answer I'm looking for number 29. Let's move up on to the next. Now we do move on to chapter 9.1. And 9 starts talking about square roots instead of exponents. And here you're asked to find all the square roots. And it's possible, as it says here, that a number will have no square roots. So let's look. Okay, the first one I wanted you to do was the square root of 64. Now, it's up to you whether you want to memorize square roots or you just want to memorize squares. If you want to memorize just squares, and you do at least have to do that, you need to know that 1 squared equals 1, for example, and 2 squared, oops, my pen's not working so great, is it, equals 4. I'm not going to write all of them out, don't worry. 3 squared equals 9. And you're going to need to memorize this list all the way down at least to 10 squared. So you need to know all the way up to there. Now to find square roots, you're going to work in the opposite direction. So the square root of 4 is that 2. The square root of 9 is that 3. So similarly, if you are able to build this whole list, you'll find 64 over here on your list, and you'll find that the square root of 64 is 8. But the key point is to realize it could be 8 or it could be negative 8. Basically, what I need you to realize is that any number, when you take its square root, could be positive or negative. Negative 8 times negative 8 is 64, just like negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So when you're doing square roots, you're generally going to get 2 answers, a positive and a negative. Let's move on to the next one that I want you to do. Okay, this time I want you to do the square root of negative 25. Well, in this case, you can't take the square root of a negative. There isn't any number that you can multiply times itself to get negative 25. Yes, you can multiply negative 5 times positive 5, but you're not multiplying the same number times itself. Negative 5 is a different number than positive 5. So there aren't 2 matching numbers that you can multiply to make negative 25. You can't multiply 2 matching numbers to make any negative number. So any negative, whether it's question 2 here, square root of negative 16, or if you've been given the square root of negative 100, it doesn't matter. It's going to be, the answer is going to be no square roots. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Now you're actually shown questions with the square root symbol. Notice back here, it was just find the square roots, but there was no square root symbol shown. The only difference here is they actually put the square root and they say evaluate it. Let's see which one I asked you to do. I asked you to do number 10. And the square root of negative 64, well, this is different. There's no negative sign inside the square root. In fact, as I look across here, none of these have the square root inside. That's not asking you to take the square root of negative 64. It's saying take the square root of 64 and then make it negative. Doesn't sound so different maybe, but it really is. A square root sign is just like parentheses as far as PEMDAS is concerned. And remember, PEMDAS says do what's inside parens first. So you do the square root first. You're going to end up with 8. And then you make it negative 8. I know you could say it's plus or minus 8, but in this case I'd really rather make sure you understand about the negative part of it. We always say that the square root, like this, when the negative's on the outside, is a negative number. Okay, moving on to the next set of examples. This time you were supposed to plug values in to this formula, square root of b squared minus 4ac. This is actually a formula that you'll use quite a bit next year in Algebra 2. So I want you to get a little bit comfortable with it, just with the part about plugging values into that formula. The first one I asked you to do was 17. Well, here I've just rewritten the formula. Square root of b squared minus 4ac. Well, in place of b squared, I put 5, or 5 squared, because that's what b is. And I write down the minus 4. In place of a, I write 1, because there it is, 1. And in place of c, I write negative 6, because there it is again. Okay, so now, 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is 25. Minus 4 times 1 is minus 4. So I've got 25 minus 4 times minus 6. Here's the crucial point that a lot of people lose. Minus times minus is plus. A lot of people are going to come out of this saying it's 25 minus 24. It's not 25 minus 24. It's 25 plus 24. Make sure you don't lose track of that. Minus times minus is plus. So that's actually supposed to say, that's a typo there, that's supposed to say 24. So it's 25 plus 24, apologize for the typo, that really is equal to 49. The square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. Make sure you keep track of that plus or minus there, just like one of the very first slides that I've shown you. Any square root is going to have plus minus as its answer. The square root of 49 is plus or minus 7. Let's try another one. Number 22. I've rewritten the formula out for you again here. B squared minus 4ac, taking the square root of that. In place of b, I'm going to put negative 4, and I have. In place of a, I'm going to put 3 here, and in place of c, I'm going to put 5 here. So, negative 4 squared. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16. This number is always going to turn out to be positive here. You're either multiplying a negative times a negative and getting a positive, or you're either multiplying a negative times itself is really what I should be saying, and you're going to get a positive, or you're multiplying a positive times itself and you're going to get a positive. But this first number, b squared, is always going to turn out to be positive. But then I've got minus 4 times 3, that's minus 12. Times 5. Minus 12 times 5 is negative 60. Okay, so 16 minus 60 is going to be a negative number. It's actually negative 44. You can't take a square root when there's a negative inside. So that's why undefined comes up on the answer key that I showed you, and also the answer that I've written here. Any square root that ends up taking the square root of a negative is going to be undefined. Let's keep going. Nope, actually let's not. It looks like that's it. Okay, so that was the last answer that you had to arrive at. That's the end of packet 8 and 9, and I will separately be making a packet later for chapter 10.